everyone. Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shemin. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter, Day School of Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kovanovsky, Anshe Chesed of New York City. We are recording this on day 697 of the war and 697 of the captivity of the hostages. We say this every week. First of all, we are thinking of them and praying for their release. But the second thing that we say is we can't believe that it's this length of time, and that this coming week, this Parasha Ki Tetzei, I think on the Friday of this week, we'll be hitting the number 700 and
It
700
also happens to
days.
be it also happens to be American Labor Day as we record this,
Yeah,
and we're very. These are all heartbreaking things because these two individuals were both killed on 10/7/23. But Elon Weiss and Idan Shtivi's bodies came back this week thanks to an operation of Tzahal.
it's just amazing, at 100 days we had rallies and here we are 700 days and it's as if we cannot go forward as a people. I think and that's just stating the obvious, and we state that obvious thing every week as we move into Parsha Ki Tetzei. Ki Tetzei is our Parsha this week, but before we get to Ki Tetzei, just let me announce that Mazel Tov to Mayan, my daughter, and John Herman, her fiance. She is engaged. She was engaged, announced it last week. We're thrilled about that. John Herman comes from Scarsdale, son of Ziva, Dr. Ziva, and Dr. Larry Herman. And so Mayan is, we hope the wedding will take place B'sha'a Tova Muslachat sometime next year, probably next August from now. So Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. And
Looking
that,
forward, and as long as we're saying happy days, my colleague here at Anshe Chesed, Rabbi Yael Hammerman, and her husband, Rabbi Josh Rabin, their daughter, their oldest daughter, Hannah Rabin's going to have a bat mitzvah on this parsha on Shabbos. Sending out great mazel tov to our other colleagues, Rabbi Richie Hammerman and Sharon Hammerman, to celebrate the bat mitzvah of their granddaughter. We're all looking forward to a big celebration at Anshe Chesed. You're all invited. Come.
here you go. So let's just go right into the parsha, which has the most mitzvot of a lot of all the parshas, 74 mitzvot. I think it's I mean you have a bat mitzvah in your show. What would be some of the themes that you would frame this parsha in terms of themes relating to the mitzvot, themes of how to understand these mitzvot? I'm going to just kind of lob the ball to you, Jeremy, and just say,
Okay.
just take us on some
Okay.
thematic
Well,
curves
yeah.
here.
Okay, so I want to say, first of all, that Hannah Rabin's Dvar Torah coming up is ingenious and very, very insightful, very good, and not about the topic that is the most natural for B'nai Mitzvah kids in this parsha, because Yael very cleverly said every kid talks about the third mitzvah in the parsha. The third mitzvah in the parsha is
The
the
rebellious
rebellious
child.
child. The rebellious child. The many times the Torah. I mean, this is not the main theme I would give you. I'm just going to make an observation now about these early passages. Many times we tend to think that if you read something in the Torah, it's the Torah. It speaks in the name of God. It's in the voice of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's an articulation of what should be. But that's a little bit distorting because many times, and our parsha is a good example, it is in fact a reform of a worse practice that the Torah does not try to make a perfect practice, it just tries to make a better practice. So the first story, the first mitzvah in the Torah is incredibly, I must say, for contemporary life, including in the wake of October 7th, about sexual violence and war. You would prefer that the Torah would say, don't ever, under any circumstances, do such a thing. What the Torah in fact says, and the rabbis describe this with the phrase Dibra Torah keneged Yetzer Hara, the Torah addressed your worst instinct. It says a female captive in war has to be treated as a full wife. She cannot be abused on the battlefield. She has a month of mourning. But if you're going to bring this female captive into your house, it has to be a as a full wife and only as a full wife. Now, you kind of want the Torah to say, don't ever do such a thing. Instead, the Torah says, listen, we know human capacity for evil. What we would like to do is reform it with uh, a little bit more recognition of kindness. So the third mitzvah in the Torah is the rebellious child. The third mitzvah in this parsha is the rebellious child. The mother and the father say this child, he's rebellious, he's wicked, he doesn't listen to us, he's a drunkard, he's a glutton, he's a thief, he's bad. You have to take him to the elders of the town, and you have to make this claim. And if it is all proven, then that child is executed. It does not say, parents, when your children are problematic, execute them. It says, parents, you do not have the right when you just are at the end of your rope and you just can't take it to handle matters yourself. You have to defer this to the elders of your town. And that's what 13-year-olds love to talk about. They talk about the image of a parent at the end of their rope who does violence to their children. Anyway, Yael told her daughter Hannah, you cannot talk about this. Everybody talks about this. She's talking about something else. The overall theme of the parsha, which I think is you have 74 mitzvot. You have no narrative. You have no articulation of here is the main theme of this week's parsha. You just have a lot of mitzvot. But if you look at all the mitzvot in general, ranging from the necessity of having honest weights and measures, to the necessity of letting animals eat when they're working in threshing out the food, to the necessity of letting human beings eat while they are working with food, and many other similar examples. The whole theme of the parsha is sometimes people are powerful, sometimes other beings, animal beings or human beings, are they're at the beck and call of more powerful people. You powerful people, don't take advantage of those powers. Don't exploit those powers. Don't exploit the vulnerable people. See to it that you do justice and kindness and mercy, even when there is, as there inevitably will be, a great power differential.
So I just want to push back a little bit because among those 74 mitzvot are mitzvot that we are perhaps overlooking or maybe just kind of, I want to use the term, we're putting out of service. Okay, it's like the bus that is not operating. These are mitzvot that are not operational for us in the community. I'll pick a benign one. Okay, a benign in the sense of, we've managed as a Jewish people to figure out ways to mitigate the mamzer, for example, the illegitimate child. Right? We've basically neutralized that, but there are other,
You have to modify what you say. In the conservative world, it's been neutralized, not necessarily in the Orthodox world.
Actually, I think that even not so heterodox halacha has found ways to mitigate the mamzer. But why don't you explain the basic lines of what a mamzer is?
a
And
mamzer is a child of an illegitimate child, the child of an adulterous union. Okay,
so mamzer, we use the Yiddish term, like the Yiddish ish. Oh, he's a mamzer to mean he's a bad person. And mamzer does not mean, technically speaking, the way we would use the English word bastard, like that your parents weren't married. It means that a child produced by a sexual union that is forbidden at the level of karet. It's not two single people. That's not a mamzer. It's an otherwise married woman or an incestuous union.
right. Okay, so that's a very, we have deep moral problems with that because the child is not responsible for how that child came into the world. And the tradition has found its way to mitigate this. What about the sex with a betrothed woman or rape and marriage? These are highly problematic mitzvot that we have kind of neutralized or we have set aside. Or I use the metaphor, it's like it's not in service. These are mitzvot that are not in service. And what I'm saying to you, Jeremy, and Barry, you'll chime in on this, is that we do employ a certain kind of methodology in dealing with problematic texts. One of which is what you just did for us, which is you contextualize them. So you say to us, look, this is a snapshot of antiquity in which the world as it was a world filled with violence and filled with enslavement and filled with power, abuse of power. And here we have a situation where the biblical Israel understands this and puts it in another frame, or tries to remove that, or to change or transform that. We also have a magnificent way of reinterpreting texts or allegorizing texts. Um, Drosh v'kabel sachar, which would mean, Barry, what? Study it and get a reward.
Interpret and receive a reward
And
for.
and then we also have just discard it, just gloss over it. And
So,
yeah, go ahead.
so I was reminded when you began that I believe that the director Spike Lee read this Parsha before he filmed his movie Do the Right Thing, because that's the general theme when you have so many laws, is that there is a correct way to behave. And what struck me about what Jeremy said is that the mitzvot here are not just legal maxims, rules that we have to follow, but it suggests that they're grounded in a kind of morality where our behavior is what's important. And the recognition that we're not always going to do the right thing at the beginning is going to shape a lot of these laws and also a lot of our strategies for dealing with them. And I think that this fits in very well with the basic theme of Deuteronomy, Sefer Devarim, which is exhortatory, it's sermonic, and it's really trying to move people inch by inch, as it were, recognizing that society cannot always function in the black and white, which is how we tend to see law.
We're recording this on Monday evening, Monday afternoon, and here on Labor Day Monday, I had a bar mitzvah, and to call out Itai Graham, who made a lovely bar Torah today. This is bar mitzvah boy. He said about these mitzvot in the parasha. For example, returning lost objects. For example, not plowing an ox and an ox and a donkey together, which is just not going to work. It's not going to be fair to the donkey. The various other kinds of ephah or unjust coins. He said, I just love this line. He said, the Torah addresses the best that we can be, but even more importantly, addresses the worst that we can be. And I thought that was just a great observation. Yasha,
Nice.
13-year-old boy, for recognizing that we do have great capacities for good. And hooray for that. That's why I feel to be a religious humanist, because I do believe we have great capacities for good. And you know what? We have the capacities to be the kind of person, and this was his favorite verse in the Torah, Lo tuchal lehitalem, you cannot be indifferent. And he said, he said about himself today, in his bar mitzvah speech, my aspiration is not to be indifferent. Yasher koach to him.
And Yasher koach. And as you say these things, I'm thinking like, yeah, but
Itai Graham, by the way, camper on the Berkshires camper this year. Yeah.
okay. So there's a whole section of our people that is quite indifferent to the law and to the Torah and to teaching. Not that they are evil and not that they are, in any way bad, but it's like, this doesn't have purchase on my life. This doesn't, and I think the reason why it doesn't have purchase on my life, because they can't take it seriously when they read the opening paragraphs of the Parsha. They may not be able to take it seriously, take them seriously, perhaps because they've never had a serious conversation about them, or maybe they've been, I don't want to accuse, but why not? I mean, there are plenty of teachers who have taught these texts who really have done quite a disservice. I mean, I think, as we are in the season of repentance, I'm thinking like, there's one section of repentance that we don't really talk about, which is that teachers sometimes can, and that's, I mean, all of us, we can say things, and we could shape things in a way that make it so unpalatable for people. We could make a lot of mistakes, and those mistakes have lifelong implications for people on the text. Rather than say to someone, look, this is how perhaps we should understand this way, or perhaps we should simply discard it altogether. Maybe that's a viable option. Maybe when it comes to this, just press delete. And maybe that's a viable, we read the Torah and we revere the Torah. The Torah is an ancient text, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to problematic texts, we should simply not, it's not that we shouldn't read them. We shouldn't just invest, we shouldn't invest them, or we should allegorize them, or we should reinterpret them, or what?
Right. The problem, though, is that we have a tendency, I think, to jettison things too early. And we have to be cautious about that. And I'm reminded that when we fall in love with a whole human being, not a perfect human being. And we take the person with the flaws as well as with the good qualities. And I think at some level we have to do the same with the Torah. I would agree with you that operationally we may not want to follow in practice certain laws that we find repugnant, but I'm not so sure that it's a good idea to overlook them or to turn away from them when we study the Torah.
I feel like, you know, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Elliot, and Barry. I'm sure in school you probably have experienced this even more than the two of us in pulpit life. But when we get Acharei Mot Kedoshim, I mean, there was a young man in my synagogue who was gay and was in shul one Saturday with his parents, who were like shul going Jews, and he got the prohibition on male homosexuality. He's like, what? I'm out of here. And he was out of here for a few years. And then he came back and he was like, why don't you just skip this? And I had to explain that we actually don't skip stuff, but we also we don't, when reading the Torah, we don't just control X and skip out the bad stuff. But neither does that mean that everything that we read, we just say, okay, yeah, that's the best possible way to be. In fact, I think that it is like often, very often the offensive or things that we disagree with, they function like the grain of sand in the oyster, which creates the pearl. And I don't want to just skip stuff. I want to wrestle with stuff. And I think that the drosh v'kabel sachar approach, to me, is very rich. It says, listen, there are things like the classical example of the rebellious child who should be executed for their rebelliousness. No, it shouldn't ever happen. We do not want it to happen in practice. We do not want a child. Let's just imagine ourselves, because we all know adolescents who are going through difficult growth periods. You're not fitting in. Well, we're going to kill you until you fit in. That's not a thing. But neither it is a thing to say, cut and paste, control X, let's get it out of the Torah. Let us say, is there something that we can learn from it? Is there some way that it becomes part of our discourse, it becomes part of our tradition, and we can think about it and recognize that as for practice, and about this I agree with what Elliot said, this is shelo kehalacha. This is not a thing that we would not do in practice. We don't do, I mean, how many mitzvot of the 613 mitzvot are sacrificial or purity related that we don't do, but we still think we can learn from them?
Right, because they speak to certain aspects of our condition. They speak to certain elements of emotion, and I think we should translate the words drosh v'kabel sachar. And I want to kind of prove the point actually from this text. So drosh v'kabel sachar means study it or seek inside it and get the reward from that, and get the reward being the satisfaction of learning something. So here's my question on the specific text, which is, when it tells us that the parents come to the shar, they come to the gate, which is where the court is. V'amru el ziknei iro, they make the claim, the charge, B'neinu zeh sorer u'morer, our child is disloyal and defiant. Einenu shomea b'koleinu, he does not heed us. That's where they give it all away, right? That's what they're really saying. Zolel v'sovei is a glutton and drunkard. So I would expect the Torah to say immediately something like, you make your inquiry, you do your process, vidarashta v'chacharta, etc. But it doesn't say that. It says urgamuhu. Immediately it says they should stone him. And so I would place between verse 20 and verse 21 the big puzzle and the big question mark, which is, hey, wait a minute. You yourself in Torah, you are undermining yourself here by jumping to the conclusion based on the claim of the parent without due process. That already invalidates the process. So when it says urgamu, it's invalid. That the Torah itself becomes invalidated based on the fact that the Torah violates a due process.
It's interesting. As we know, the Torah appears without vowels or punctuation.
Yes.
So it's possible to have a question mark after Urgamuhu.
Yes.
So one of the things that is striking here is that we don't always ask
No, talk
ourselves
that out.
what
Talk that out. You got to explain that
I
a little
will.
bit.
I have to say something first.
Yeah.
What we don't always ask ourselves what the alternative is. The alternative in this particular case is that the parents beat the kid to death. By having to take him to the city gate, there's a distance that's created and a removal from the situation where the parents no longer have all the power. And so they make their pitch and they're supposed to come to the realization, do we really want to stone him? And I think that the answer could possibly be no. One last point in this regard, I know you want to say something important, Elliot, is that there's a countertext with all these cases of Derosh v'Kabel Schar, and that is a rabbi who said, well, this really happened. So there's the view that says it never happened, and we study for our reward, and the other view that says it did happen. And what I've become increasingly aware of is that both views are on the same page of Talmud because they're both part of our community. And we have to, no
Amen.
matter where we fall on the spectrum, whether we're the Derosh Kabel Schar or we're the believers in the literal truth, we have to recognize that the other person is part of our community and he or she cannot be excluded.
Do you know,
Amen. That is so deep because how many times have we said the utterly misleading phrase? The Talmud tells us, no. On every page of the Talmud is a dispute. So the Talmud tells us that this is never put into practice, and it is purely a matter of drosh bekabel sachar, seek out its meaning and receive the reward. And so says, actually, I saw it.
here's the drush that I
I just
want
want
to
to
get to.
give the great your wonderful comment about the ironic exclamation point reading. This is eats, shoots, and leaves, right?
Yeah.
So the old joke is two yeshiva bachers go to the beach. It says beach closed, no swimming, and the one yeshiva bacher goes, ugh, bummer, beach closed, no swimming, and the other guy says, what are you misread it? It's beach closed, no swimming.
I have always found compelling another reading of this, which is connecting it to the Ten Commandments and showing that there are in each of the five books there are violations, or from Shmot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim, there are key violations of the Ten Commandments and going on into Yoshua, etc. And that this is the violation of the fifth commandment, Kabeda Davicha Vetimecha. We have the violation of Shabbat and Bamidbar with the Koshesh Etzim, the person who gathers on Shabbat. We have the violation in Vayikra with the of the third commandment of misusing God's name, and the violation of idolatry in the book of Shemot. So here we have a violation of the fifth commandment, which is honor your father and your mother, and so there's no case here. There's no story. The other three, golden calf, the nokev, and the mikoshesh, the blasphemer and the gatherer, they're real stories. But can you imagine a story? It should say here, there was, and so from the tribe of so and so came out, and he was a drunkard and a glutton, and he cursed his parents, and the parents took him to the Bet Din, and the Bet Din said, yes, take him out and stone him. That's what we should get a story here, but we don't get a story. Instead, we
The,
get a theoretical law.
the sages give you a little bit of a midrash in that vein because the first three mitzvot are first three mitzvot in the parsha is the battlefield captive. Then you have the man with two wives, one hated and one beloved, and the physical firstborn is born to the hated woman, but the little paterfamilias there wants to give the right of inheritance to the firstborn of the beloved woman, which, by the way, is a very overt criticism of Jacob.
Exactly,
The Jacob
exactly.
story. You know, Leah, who's the less loved wife, is the mother of the firstborn child Reuben, but Jacob, in fact, treats Joseph as the Bechor, as the firstborn, because he's the child of the beloved wife Rachel,
Praise the
and
Bechor,
the
the
rebellious
beloved wife.
child. The rabbinic classical midrash is it's just a brilliant and creative act of interpretation. If you take a wife under this fundamentally unethical means, you think you're going to love her, but you are not going to love her. You are going to end up being sorry you did this, and it is going to wreck the proper and ethical distribution of your property. And you know what it's going to produce? It is going to produce a child with PTSD who is going to be a rebellious and difficult child, and that's when you're going to get lost in this
So,
mess.
I want to add here that while a human being is not allowed to favor the second-born child of the beloved wife over the firstborn child of the not so beloved wife, God does do that, right? He favors Isaac over Ishmael, he favors Jacob over Esau. David is favored over all of his brothers, and perhaps it comes as a reminder that we're not God.
As if I needed another reminder.
Well,
Well, in the Torah, you sometimes do.
I want to conclude with the theme of reminding, because the Parsha does end on that note of remembering Amalek, and I think that you know, it's valuable to cite that commandment, not only because it segues into the next parsha, but because it raises another theme, and that there are things that we are to remember. One of the things that we're supposed to remember actually is Miriam, which is a whole other conversation. But Barry, I want to pitch it to you and ask you to reflect a little bit on this last set of mitzvot, and specifically on the theme of, there are things that we carry a lot in our people.
So in Sefer Shemot, after the Exodus, the people are attacked by this tribe, Amalek, in some terrible manner. It seems from the text that they're attacked from the rear, where the women and children are. In other words, the soldiers themselves were not attacked, but the weakest members of the people. And Moses sends them into battle under Joshua, and with the help of Hur and Aharon, who hold Moses' hands up, Amalek is vanquished, and God says that you have to at some point destroy them. So in our parsha, we have the recall of that event, and God says one day you'll be at peace in your land, and then there will be time to destroy Amalek. And what struck me reading it today, and we read this story 2 or 3 times a year, is that this is something that happened before the entrance of the people into the land. And yet it's something that they carried with them in some way and did not have a resolution until the time of Shmuel. And one can argue there is no resolution, which suggested to me that part of the meaning of the story is that there are things that we carry that we have to learn how to deal with because we cannot excise them from our lives. They remain present from time to time, and we have to learn how to deal with them.
We're always struck by the paradox of this mitzvah, which is you have to remember, but you have to erase the memory of them. And I'm not sure there's a way out of it. I'm not. I've thought about this. I've given sermons that I can't remember my own sermons about this because I've forgotten.
That's a blessing.
It's just a blessing about this.
When the rabbi can't remember the sermon, it's a blessing. When the congregation can't, that's
the
a
point
curse.
is, I'm following the mitzvah because I've erased the memory from my mind. And maybe that's the way it should be. I think it's actually maybe not a theoretical conversation about what constitutes erasure. Is erasure obliteration, annihilation, or is erasure, look, we we're simply not going to give credence or give any mention. I'll give you one example. There was a shooter last week. May his memory be erased. Okay.
Ugh, that was the worst.
And so we are seeing very often that with regard to mass shooters, the press has now, not always, but not recited the name, not mentioned the name, and there's a value to that in a cultural way, which is we we are not going to give posthumous honor by even mentioning a name to a perpetrator of such evil. Now, the question becomes, well, we have to learn history and we have to learn from this, and we have to learn from, the perpetrator of evil against the people of Israel when they left, because it's not only a biblical tale, but it's a warning. They're their arch enemy, they're radical evil, they stand for something more than what they are in the Torah, and therefore there's something to learn from that. So that's why we are mentioning their name, even though in the same breath we are erasing them. But
It
I
feels
don't
like
know.
to me that the paradox is exactly as you said. You must always remember to blot out this name. If you ever succeeded, you wouldn't have anything else to blot out. So that just means to me that no matter how hard you work at blotting out evil, evil remains inscribed before our very eyes, and that's a lifelong or species long or
Okay.
eternity long project.
And
Well
look,
Um,
said.
I think part of what it means to be a Jew. To be a Jew is to always call out evil, and to be as attentive and aware of it as possible at every time, and to not be shy about that. But we have come to the conclusion of the Parsha. We've come to the conclusion of our half hour together. And we are wishing everyone a good Shabbat. As you know, Barry, you're starting a school year this week, so good luck.
Yes.
You start the school year,
how many years for you? Some
This will
figure
be number 28.
28.
28. Ooh, koach. That's
This is
koach.
for
We wish
me.
you
I
koach.
I
Wish
came
you not koach.
to Highland Park in August of '94, so this is 31 for
Wow.
me.
This is my 25th. I started a few weeks before 9/11, so this will be the
Unbelievable.
25th Rosh Hashanah for me at Anshe Hessen.
And it's about our 12th year doing Parsha, who knows? But we are still the number one rated Parsha podcast in Dutchess County. Cameron by the Berkshires, thank you so much for watching and listening. We are so honored by your attention to our weekly conversation. Thank you for putting us up, Mitch and Mernick and the whole Kol Ramah staff.
כל
And
ישראל, מה אתה אומר? כל ישראל, הנה החדשות.
102.3 online as well at korama.us, I believe. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week on the next edition of Parasha Talk. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Here we go.